Traditional art teaching is making way for more contemporary approaches. No one knows this more than the head of Media and Visual Arts at Welling Specialist Art School.
I think we need to make the subject as relevant as possible, and whilst there's certainly room for looking at the kind of traditional school emphasis on dead white Europeans is problematic. When they're looking at paintings made several hundred years ago, they have no real kind of access point. So I think that one of the prime reasons for using contemporary art is that you're likely to touch on things that touch on the students' lives themselves, so that they can see the relevance and they can see why somebody might be making a piece of work about that subject.
In this film, we're going to follow Henry Ward as he leads a contemporary art project using photography as a way into composition and critical appreciation.
Think about what you're doing here. Look what's happening with the shadows. You could really exaggerate that.
Henry's Mixed Ability Year 8 class are 5 weeks into their project.
This morning we're going to be carrying on from where we left off last week. If you remember, some of you have taken photographs, some of you are about to take photographs, some of you are working towards your photographs. So in a second we're going to divide you up into groups. What I want to do to start with is just to remind ourselves of where we've got. So if I could have everybody from these tables. The idea of this particular module was to introduce the students to both a contemporary way of looking at sort of practicing art, but also to introduce them to photography. Last week some of you took your first sort of practice photos, so we've got some examples there of some of the things you're taking. The project begins by an introduction to using the camera. And whereas you'll ask students frighteningly at 12 years old how many of you draw at home, and there will be some hands that go up and say they don't, all of them will take photographs. They all take photographs. They've all got photographs. And so this is familiar territory. This isn't something that they're scared of. They can all do it. And they're sent off and they take photographs of one another. And we leave it at that to start with. So that most of the first photographs that come back, there obviously are exceptions, but are photographs where the lighting is wrong, where somebody's perhaps stood in front of a window, where the framing is all odd, where things are out of focus or wobbly. And we talk about why that might be and how we can improve on that. And so the next piece of equipment introduced is then a tripod. We look at how you can keep images stable even in low light. We then introduce light sources, just simple little kind of cheap halogen lamps from a DIY shop, and then backdrops so that we can create plain backgrounds. And by the time they've got to the third sort of set of photographs they're taking, they're actually beginning to organise and plan what they're actually going to photograph before they photograph it.
I think that we need to give children the opportunity to play, to make errors, to fall over, if you like, to pick themselves up and go again in art education. But many teachers don't teach contemporary art, or they don't teach art in a contemporary way, simply because they're terrified of it. They're terrified of failure. And unfortunately, in order to gain good GCSE passes, quite often they feel less free to experiment, to test boundaries, to try out ideas. People say, where there's a will, there's a way, in terms of overcoming those issues. And if people want to overcome them, then I think they can do.
Now, if you remember a few weeks ago, we started looking at the work of an artist called Cindy Sherman. And she started off exclusively in black and white, which she intended to kind of appear as though she was different sorts of characters from different kinds of films. And she used different genres. Who can remember what that word means?
Types of photos, like how gangsters.
Excellent. So sort of styles and stories. And as her work progressed, she started using colour and so on. And what kinds of devices is she using in these photographs? What sorts of things is she using to make us feel that this is horror, that something else is gangster, and so on? What kinds of things is she using in the photos, Mitchell?
The blood on her face.
Okay, excellent. So the blood on the face, the kind of makeup, the way she's dressed, Mickey?
The darkness of the pictures and stuff.
Brilliant. What would be another way of saying that apart from the lighting? Excellent. So where she's actually placed the light. We start by looking at this point at the work of Cindy Sherman and discussing the kind of films that may have inspired her photographs. And the students are then invited to go off and choose their own genre, to brainstorm ideas about the kind of images they could have, and to go off for homework then and gather materials. So they'll go and get film stills from the internet or scanned in from the backs of video packets and so on, and research different sorts of cinematic genres. And it's important that we stick to that kind of area, but that then it's broad within that.
I had to take lots of photos, and in quite a lot of them they laughed and they smiled, and I just
I showed this to them, and this is how I wanted them to look. Like I told them why they shouldn't be like really happy or really upset, and then I showed them that like in the picture, which wasn't very good.
Once you've engaged students, once they're excited by the subject, then they will start to draw, and they will engage with lessons involved in drawing. But if you're asking them to already attempt something that they perceive as being beyond them, then you're asking for trouble, really. Almost without being asked to, they naturally then start to draw what their ideas are going to be like. Even if they're stick figure drawings, they're using drawings as a tool in order to work with a team of 3 or 4 others and explain how they want their photographs to look, which is quite an important leap for them to make, that it isn't always about creating a finished thing.
Well, here I just got like general ideas, like different characters, but from like the movies I watched. And basically I just got an idea of a gangster coming back into like revenge everybody. And here I got to think of which part of the body I'm going to focus the camera on. And here I've just written down everything that's going to be in the picture, like what the effects are going to be.
They start to quite naturally learn skills about working with one another, forming working groups, supporting one another in how to do things. So everything from making up one another's faces if they're using makeup and helping one another get changed into costumes, to actually looking at one another's sketchbooks to work out what somebody's intending to do and how they're going to take it. That sometimes in order to create things you need other people to help you out, and it isn't just an individual thing. And that obviously links right the way across the curriculum, and it's a skill that once acquired they can take into all sorts of other subjects.
Now that is good. Shut your eye.
Portrait or landscape format? That way? It's your Charlie's, isn't it? So you need to go that way around. Okay.
Layla, turn the other way.
What the students do by taking the photographs is they naturally have to come to terms with issues like composition, quite complex issues like the position of the viewer of an image, because they're physically positioning a camera to create a particular effect.
And just flick your hair back a bit, Lay, just a little bit. Yeah.
That's fantastic, nice showing. Now think about what you're doing here. Look, can you see, put the light back on a sec, where you had it. You see what's happening with the shadows? You could really exaggerate that if you bring, or even come below his hands. So talk to your lighting person, talk to your model, keep him there and take as many as you need.
Maybe if Lego stands out of it, so it's like you can only see Lego's back.
It is more about trusting students and trusting them to find interesting and innovative ways of illustrating what they're thinking about, or describing or exploring what they're thinking about. And I think that it's about perhaps putting them in a position where they know that they can trust their ideas, and that they know that they can that their ideas have value.
Nathan, can you go from the corner down?
Things like lighting, it's often something they wouldn't even consider if they were producing a drawing of the light source, but they begin to consider it very quickly with the camera because it's so immediate to see the effect it has.
Move it across a bit, down, so you've got the shadow of the gun.
Once they're actually engaged in the process in the lesson, it's remarkable watching how students will take on different roles. You've got the students who are just extremely excited that they get to dress up in school, and that they get to put makeup on and turn themselves into a zombie or a gangster. But you've also got the students who will take a leading role in each group. Sometimes even if they're not responsible for taking the photograph, they'll be organising the models, making sure people are set in the right positions and so on, and talking to one another and liaising with one another to make sure things happen. And that's a really rewarding thing as a teacher, because you can see them actually growing in confidence.
We are, of course, in a rapidly changing world now, and one of the great challenges for teachers nationally and internationally is inclusion. How do we make teaching and learning and the content of teaching and learning relevant to all children? So I think contemporary approaches, if you choose the right material, if you use the right starting point, can make learning, can make making for all children meaningful and relevant. And what I think is so positive and exciting about contemporary modes of working is that it places the onus on the child to identify what they want to talk about, what they want to celebrate.
Greenish, so like when he's died, he's been there for quite a while. And the base has gone.
Okay. And you've rotated that round, haven't you?
Yeah, so it looks like he's hanging on the side. So
Excellent. What about with the others? Let's look at the other ones. The next stage is to take those onto the computer and to use some photo manipulation software. Although I'll show them some of the tools that are available, I like to focus them on just a few simple tools that are, if you like, repeating what you would do in a dark room, altering contrast, cropping and framing slightly differently, saturation of colour, a fairly simple, fairly narrow range of things that they can then use to manipulate their photographs. And the outcome is far more professional when they do that than if they're allowed to just play with filters and so on. Yeah, if you use the top left tool, that one, you can actually crop in on a section of the face. You could close right in on something and hold the mouse down and draw a box. I feel it's very important for contemporary art to be used at all levels in schools. Why somebody might be making a piece of work about that subject.
We've done it, and what we need to do is like put a cave in the background. So it's like a spiders took them into a cave and killed them.
If you're sort of focusing on making and practical application of learning, then you'll find pupils who maybe struggle in English and maths are very, very good and very accomplished. And I think it's an interesting thing to sort of look at, because the perceived kind of hierarchy within a class can shift completely within a practical lesson. We get students who at 11 years old have got a fantastically low self-esteem often, and perhaps by focusing on subjects such as art, which are in primary curriculum still often deemed as secondary subjects.
Look at more like Dan, not on Layla, more Dan. Like this.
We've got pupils discovering that they are intelligent, they are imaginative and bright and interested in the world, and that it gives them an opportunity to both to illustrate that, but also to realise it for themselves and to grow as individuals. And I think that thing about them then developing confidence to take into other subjects is very true. Right, well done. I think that was brilliant. We've got masses and masses done. I ran this project for the first time near the end of my first year here, or something similar to it. And so the students that I taught in Year 7 then are now in Year 11. And you can see the impact that this project and others like it have had on them as now GCSE and prospective A-level students, as they are at sort of 16 years old, who are much, much more comfortable with both using their own imagination, their own ideas, and accessing things in a different kind of way to perhaps students who haven't had the opportunity or didn't have the opportunity to do these projects.
I think it's all about confidence. I think one of the saddest sights in schools is those little knots of kids, who kind of cling together because they feel, completely lacking in confidence, completely, at sea in the school environment. Quite often kids like that feel very at ease in the art department because it's a place where they can be themselves, begin to talk about who they are. If they can take that sort of confidence with them into learning in other areas, it's bound to enhance their learning possibilities.
Very, very few of the children that I teach are going to be artists, if any. Not many more will work in an art industry, and lots of them may never make art again when they leave school, but they are going to be involved in a world that's surrounded by imagery and by pictures, and they do need to know how to access and understand them. And I think that it's tremendously important they have confidence in doing that.